Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Growing Up in Scientology. We're doing another interview today with Victoria Locke. Hi, Victoria.
Hi.
Thanks for joining me today. I see you've got a little munchkin there.
I do.
She's adorable.
Thank you.
Just to introduce you, you got into Scientology through family members when you were about 10 years old. Is that right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And you've been considered yourself out of Scientology for a few years now?
Yes.
Well, I think there's some particular parts of your story and your experience that I think are the main reason you wanted to do an interview today. Let's kind of go through it, I guess, from the beginning.
Sure.
How did you get introduced to Scientology?
I was about 10 or 11, and I was living with my grandparents, who were my guardians at the time. And my older brother actually was the one that got me in because he had been in the church for a while. So when I was 10, I was going through some really rough times at home, and I was showing signs of mental distress. So I was depressed, I was self-harming, was going through some things. My grandparents said, okay, we're going to take her to a psychologist to see what's going on. And my brother swooped in because he had been in the church for some years at that time. And he said, no, he pumped the brakes. And he said, I'm going to take her to my counselor. They had no idea what Scientology was, but really he was taking me to his auditor. That's how I got introduced.
All right, so you're about 10 years old. You're living with your grandparents. Your brother is much older than you, right?
Much older. He's about 25-ish years my senior, yeah.
Okay, so he's a full-on adult. Your grandparents aren't involved in Scientology in any way, but your brother, upon hearing that they want to have you see a therapist, he says, no, I'll take her into Scientology. So he brings you into the org, and what happens?
So I meet with his auditor, and I see her for a couple of sessions, and I'm introduced, and it's just self-help, basically. I think I'm seeing a counselor, actually. I don't know anything about Scientology. I've never heard of it before. So I went to go see her, and then she said, there's somewhere for you to go get some courses to help improve your life a little bit and your situation that you're going through. So down the street, there's a mission, and that's how I get introduced to personal improvement courses.
So this was in California, right?
Yes.
Which mission was it?
It was in Glendale. Her office was the personal improvement.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Being only 10 years old, I mean, I have a daughter who's 10 years old. I can't imagine her even having a concept of seeing an auditor, an auditing session, even seeing a therapist, really.
Sure.
What kind of auditing did they do with you?
Looking back, it was so basic. It was just this older woman. I mean, I didn't even think of her as a counselor or a therapist or auditor. I was just like, I'm seeing this woman for help because I'm going through a crisis. And she sat me down, and we were just talking. And the first auditing session, she brought out the big Dianetics book, like the kids book. I'm like, this is really interesting. And it made sense to me, like right off the bat. Yeah, I know.
Okay. And I guess I'm trying to get an idea of like over what period of time you were going through these auditing sessions. I can only imagine it was until somebody determined this crisis had been handled or something.
It was so short, honestly. It was maybe a year that they were like, oh, this is done. This is, you're rolling. Because I was doing my courses at the mission, but I was blowing through them. And through my auditing sessions, I mean, my brother was paying for intensives, and I finished one after the other.
So over a year period, you're doing these different, is it a combination of doing auditing and doing some basic courses?
Yeah, full time.
All right. And so then once they sort of say, okay, good, we're good for now, you're fixed for now, you're better, or whatever they said.
Yeah.
How did your involvement with Scientology move on after that?
I loved the results that I was seeing because I thought that I was feeling better and that I was doing okay. So I don't know if I wanted to do more or if my auditor and the people around me were like, wow, this is a really bright kid. She should be doing more for her church. I'm not quite sure what happened there, but I started volunteering at Pasadena org before it was Ideal.
At the point you're volunteering at the org, are you going to school as well?
I was. Now that you brought that up, it just kind of like triggered a memory for me. I remember, so they asked me to join staff around 14 or 15. And I said, no, I'm a student. And I remember my reg or recruiter saying like, no, it's okay. You can, we'll just make something up. You don't have to go to school. We can just homeschool you, you know? Like, no, it's not happening. I mean, they talked to my brother about it. They talked to me endlessly about it. I mean, they were regging me at a very young age. They were sitting outside of my house.
They wanted you to leave staff. Leave school to join staff.
Yeah, yeah.
But because you wouldn't, you ended up just volunteering there.
Right, right.
So what, if you're going to school still, you're volunteering after school, evenings,
Yep.
weekends, what are you doing?
Both.
And then when do you actually join staff?
I think I was about 16 or 17 is when I joined staff. I was signed officially at LA Org.
Is LA Org where you were on staff?
Yes.
Were you still there when it when they made the transition from LA Org being a regular non-Sea Org Class 5 org to a Sea Org?
Yes.
What did they do? I mean, did they tell everyone who was not a Sea Org member that they had to go? Was there a transition period?
A lot of my time, unfortunately, is like muddled and blurred because of just some trauma that I was going through. So a lot of that's just like lumped together. I was in Div 6. I was a public reg.
You were signing people up for introductory services.
Yes. Yeah.
And I know this isn't necessarily what we are intending to talk about, but I just want to pick your brain a little bit.
Sure.
How was that?
I have so much guilt from being a public reg. It's not even funny. At the time, I really, well, let me say this. At the first of the time, I really thought I was doing something great and good for the public. And then it was like a few months in, I'm like, I feel really crappy about doing this because I didn't even believe in what I was selling. And I was talking, because I speak Spanish as well, they were putting me, they were giving me Spanish speaking people. And a lot of people in LA are low income families. So a lot of the people we were getting like body riding off the street, they didn't have money to buy a Dianetics book or a personal improvement book, you know? So I felt really like crummy about selling people these things that I knew they weren't gonna read. It's not gonna help them. They didn't know what they were even going into. They're just like, oh, we got this free handout and something cool is happening, so I'll just go in and check it out. They had no idea what it was. It's so awkward, but one in particular thing that happened, I remember, I was body riding with somebody. And this is when I was like brand new to staff. And I saw this guy on the street and I mean, I couldn't tell if he was homeless, but he presented himself to be homeless. And I was about to give him a thing because I'm thinking like, okay, we want to help people. This is a church. Who better to hand out these flyers to than a homeless person? And the person I was with said, no, we only help people who help themselves. I'm like, what? That doesn't make any sense. So who can help themselves, who can pay for services? I hated that part about being on staff. I hated it so much, especially my close connection to it because both of my parents were homeless drug addicts and both of them lived on Skid Row in LA. So I had that own personal connection and it really bothered me that the church had that mentality. And I don't understand it. I mean, I understand it now, but.
I think that's one of those things that, you know, people who've either grown up in Scientology or been in Scientology really take for granted that this is the way it is and it's totally normal, that we aren't actually interested in helping people who need help. Like the people who need help the most are not who we're here for. Exactly.
And I don't know if this is a segue or not, but at one point after my regging and I had been like, I was in the SO for a short period, I was super suicidal and it was like I think it was my second suicide attempt. And my own auditor made me sign an affidavit saying that I wouldn't sue the church. At that point, I'm a liability. If I kill myself, it's the church's fault. So I had to sign a waiver saying, no, all of my distress is my own doing and it has nothing to do with the church. And that's that was another point for me saying, I need to leave this place. You're supposed to help people. That's what you say that you do. And I needed help and they turned me away.
There was a guy I knew, a Scientologist from Philadelphia. He'd been in Scientology for like 40 years. He's a guy who'd given almost all of his money to Scientology. He'd been on staff forever. He came down here to Flag to get on his OT levels. He walked into the sandcastle and he had some kind of a stroke. and he fell down in tech reception.
Yeah.
And instead of being like, oh my God, this guy needs help, call an ambulance, they carried his ass out to the sidewalk and put him on a bench at the bus stop before calling paramedics, so that they wouldn't be exposed to any liability of someone having suffered a medical emergency on their property.
Like, in my Scientological mind, that makes sense. Like, obviously, that's what you do.
I know, as a Scientology mindset, I hear that story and I'm like, of course, flag has to be protected.
Yeah, it's awful. Man, I worked for a wise company for 7 years, and I had a seizure while I was there, and the same thing happened. I mean, they're wise, they're not necessarily the church, but still, they're very like cautious.
We spoke briefly about the main thing you wanted to discuss beforehand, and perhaps we should just jump to it. I think one of the more, what's the word that I want to use, disturbing parts of the entire Scientology story. You know, you've got people being conned out of their money, you've got families being torn apart. But one of the more truly disgusting and disturbing parts of it is this operating basis Scientology has of not reporting child sex crimes to the authorities. But I think this is also the part of the Scientology story that the authorities are most interested in. And there are investigations underway right now. It's a very appropriate time to discuss as many of these stories as possible. What is your story on this subject?
So I mentioned that I was showing some signs of mental distress, and that's the reason my brother brought me in. When I was younger, 10 or 11, I was experiencing sexual abuse from my cousin, who was 38 at the time. That went on for months. I finally told my brother about it, and then subsequently I told my auditor about it. I mean, even as a child, I thought, okay, I feel this great relief. This person's a mandated reporter. Like, she's going to do something about this. And nothing was done except for me going through some auditing. My cousin was brought in to do some auditing, and my brother introduced him to the church after the fact, and he did some courses in auditing. And in the end, the resolution was we had a chaplain cycle, and I, at 12 years old, was made to apologize to my cousin for seducing him, because the church believes even if you're a child, you're a spiritual being and you know what you're doing. I had to do my own like OW write-ups.
So your brother brought you in, but your auditor is the one you were hoping to confide in and who would do something about this. Do you tell your auditor and your brother like at the same time on the same day, or does your brother find out you told your auditor?
So my brother actually was removing me from my grandparents' house for 2 weeks, which in retrospect turned into 4 years. I ended up living with him. So he moved me out of my grandparents' house, and on that drive to his apartment, we were just talking, and that's when I confided in him and told him what was going on at home with my cousin. So then he suggested that I tell my auditor, and he said that's probably the best thing to do. And that's when I told her. After I told my auditor, my brother decided it would be a good idea for my cousin and I and him to all have meetings for like a month or two. And we would meet at public locations, like at restaurants, and we would discuss things like, and there was like as a big brother, I would think that he would protect me and be like, what the hell are you doing? And like beat somebody's ass, you know? But that didn't happen. No, we just had these meetings, and it was very like matter of fact and what happened. And I mean, we were at like a Denny's, for example.
And your cousin didn't deny it?
He did not deny it, no. What struck me the most actually about that whole thing was he didn't deny it. He said, I wish you had told me you were going to tell your brother, then we could have told him together. As if we were having some secret love affair. I'm like, what are you talking about?
Oh my God. Okay.
Yeah.
So you tell your brother.
Yeah.
Your cousin knows you told your brother. You guys are having open conversations about this.
Open, very public conversations about this.
And you tell your auditor.
Yes.
And if your brother's addressing this outside of the org, what was the org or the mission's involvement in any way in this? I mean, what happened on the org side?
It wasn't the org. My auditor is
field auditor?
Field auditor, thank you. She's a field auditor. Everything's through her. Nothing was through the org.
Are you able to say who the auditor was? Are you comfortable doing that?
Yvonne Dimogenes.
Yvonne Dimogenes.
He's
I
like
can't say that I know her. Now, I mean, a field auditor does not have any less of a responsibility in any of these matters than a mission auditor or an org auditor.
Right.
Does anything ever come of the fact that you told an auditor? Does she have you see an ethics officer? Does she try to do some chaplain handling?
She did chaplain handlings with me and my cousin and my brother all together. Yes.
With your cousin?
Yeah, that was, oh yeah, we've had a few of them actually. And the very last chaplain cycle we had, I remember because it's seared into my memory. I was sitting here, Yvonne, my auditor's here, my brother is across the way, and my cousin is next to me. We're in a very small, in her auditing room, right? And at the end of the cycle, I have to take responsibility for my actions. What those are, I'm still not clear. And I had to apologize to my cousin and hug him in front of my auditor and say that I'm sorry for my wrongdoings, that I basically took time away from you and your marriage. Mind you, he has 2 daughters at this time who are younger than I am. So the only reason I said anything was to protect his kids, my cousins. That was the resolution of the chaplain cycle.
Was he asked to apologize?
I received no apology. Nothing, no amends on his side.
What were you being told you had to make amends for?
For just potentially destroying his marriage.
And you were how old at this point?
10, 11.
What?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
During this whole process, were you ever told Scientologists don't go to the authorities, or were
Yes, yes. Like Scientologists don't report other Scientologists, period, no matter what it is, which is like mind-blowing to me because I personally know friends who have seen the exact same auditor that I did, who have gone through their own sexual abuse stories and nothing was done because of that policy.
You know, I wonder if it's helpful to the people who watch these videos to try to explain how Scientologists have this rationalized, because it's true that underneath it all, it's to protect the church. Even at the lower level of public Scientologists, the way public Scientologists end up rationalizing this is because of stuff Hubbard said about, you know, the reactive mind being the source of all aberrated behavior, which I think we would agree he would include sexually abusing children in that category.
Yes.
And he has spoken about prisons. He says, you know, prisons don't accomplish anything because you're not fixing the reactive mind. You can put someone in prison, they can serve their sentence, but they're going to re-offend because you haven't fixed the reactive mind, which was the reason they offended.
Right.
So your lower level public Scientologist can explain it as saying, well, putting them in prison doesn't fix anything.
Yeah.
And your higher level Scientologist would say, well, you have to protect the church.
Yeah.
And when you combine these two things together, you end up with a system that is against incarceration, but in any circumstances. They are against incarceration, including pedophiles, including sex offenders.
Yeah.
Except for anybody who's done something wrong to the church. Those guys can go.
You know what? Something that actually really disturbed me, that has carried with me through this whole time, it wasn't only child abuse, but I remember my auditor said something like really disturbing to me. I was hesitant to tell her something, and she said, "You know what? You can tell me anything. I've heard everything. I've had playmates as my PCs." I'm like, okay. She says, "No, but," and I've also had people who have confessed to murder as my PCs. I'm like, okay. But at the time I was like, oh, okay, somebody killed someone, so I can tell you literally anything now. But now in retrospect, I'm like, what? What were you talking about? So, I mean, there's things that are being hidden that I'm not aware of. A lot of people are not aware of, but that's crazy and scary.
I'm not even sure how a Church of Scientology is supposed to deal with it if somebody confesses to this lifetime murder in an auditing session. It sounds like your cousin is even older than your brother.
No, he's not actually. I think my brother's older.
Okay, but similar?
Yeah, with just in a couple years, yeah.
So to the best of your knowledge, is your cousin still in Scientology?
No.
Okay, so your cousin's not in Scientology. You told me earlier you weren't sure if your brother is. How are you not sure?
My brother is a special person. He is not innocent himself. I've gone through my own abuses with him. I don't know. We have a really strained relationship. But I think the last time I talked to him, I was off lines. But since then, I think he's back in.
Okay. In the times that you and your brother and your cousin did these meetings at restaurants and stuff, was there ever even a sense from your brother to your cousin that you've done something terrible here and wrong? Or was it just treating you like you guys were on equal footing?
We were on equal footing. And it angers me still, obviously. I mean, it's something that doesn't go away, but it pisses me off. And I remember one conversation we had. We were in an Italian restaurant. It was a family restaurant. We're sitting there. I'm here. My brother's next to me. My cousin's across the way. We're at a booth. We're having spaghetti for dinner. My brother asks him, "Why did you do this?" And my cousin, like, without even a thought, said, "Because she's beautiful." And I got pissed. I'm like, that's not an excuse. Whatever I said, I was mad. And my brother said, whoa, calm down. We're having an adult conversation. And I'm looking at him like, are you insane? I'm like not even 13, and I know what's right and wrong, you know. And these two adult men are having this conversation.
Here's what doesn't make sense about even how your auditor, or I'll say your brother. Here's another reason from an organizational Scientology perspective why how they responded doesn't make sense. Is your cousin was. I don't know he could even be called a Scientologist if he was just seeing a field auditor for introductory auditing. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because even that should not have been an excuse to not alert the authorities. And I'm saying this to point up the fact that Scientologists just end up with this mindset where nothing, unless it's being done to Scientology, is reported to the authorities. It's a mindset that allows abuse.
Totally.
You know, this whole Scientologist can't report on Scientologists is not a sufficient justification in this case to not have alerted the authorities.
Right.
It's deeper than that. It's this concept that you cannot rehabilitate someone in a prison. Now, I personally believe you cannot rehabilitate someone in a prison, but the fact is, prison, when it comes to sex offenders, is not there to rehabilitate them. It's there to protect people from them.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think this is where Scientologists get it doubly wrong.
Yeah.
They don't conceive, for some reason, I don't mean to let them off the hook, I'm saying for some reason they don't conceive, there are cases where prison is actually putting someone putting someone away in a cage is actually okay in some cases.
Yeah. Yeah. Rapists and child molesters. That's fine. Lock them up.
Oh, man. Scientologists have the idea of going to prison wrapped up with this idea of psychiatry and sending someone to prison. You're just sending them into the hands of the psychs.
Absolutely.
Jesus Christ. Okay. How long after did your involvement with Scientology continue?
I was in the church at least for 10 more years.
Did this event or series of events, did it come up later on at all?
I think it did one time, actually, because no, it definitely did. I think it was about 15, and my high school at the time, not Scientology affiliated, I had almost a nervous breakdown in high school. And subsequently, the teachers made me see a school psychologist because I was not doing well. So I saw the psychologist, and I told him what had happened to me when I was 10, and they're mandated reporters. Oh, thank God. And so they actually made a report against my cousin, against my brother for defending him, and my auditor. So I remember being interviewed by police and CPS, and they contacted my brother and my auditor, and I don't know what happened, but nothing was done. Both of them talked to the authorities, and the case was dropped.
That's where it gets rough. Lack of physical evidence, 3 people, they're contradicting your story. There's,
you know, what's awful about that physical evidence is I had this diary when I was, during the time that I was being abused. It's so disturbing, but I had a diary and I would write in it and I would give it to my cousin. He would write in it. I had his personal, we would exchange correspondence in this diary. My brother had that and like destroyed it. He destroyed literally all physical evidence of what had happened.
Wow.
It's weird.
In the same way that at 10 years old, you're too young to consent to anything and be treated like an adult, you're also not old enough to really determine what you're going to be active or involved in. So you continue to be involved in Scientology for 10 more years. Is this mostly a function of you still living with your brother?
It wasn't, I mean, it wasn't a function of my living with my brother. I also really believed in what I was doing. The biggest truth in my life was I wanted to help. And I was the kind of person or the kind of teenager that wanted to join the Peace Corps because I was so like gung-ho about humanity and mankind, and I want to do good for the world. That's what sucked me in mostly. I was so interested in the Sea Org. I mean, they were regging me since I was 13. So that kind of strung me along.
Let's jump forward to, how did you come to leave Scientology?
At the time that I technically left, I was working in a wise company. So there was no like big, I quit, I am leaving, I hate Scientology. It was just very quiet. I stopped going to course. I stopped contacting my auditor or like calling her back and when she was leaving me voicemails. So it was really slow. I was getting some push from my boss at work, which I'm pretty sure is illegal, but I was still getting pushes like, oh, I think Yvonne called me and you haven't seen her in a while, you know? So it was so slow. But I left one day and it's weird, but I was on the phone with somebody and I was describing Scientology to them, and hearing the words coming out of my own mouth were like, this is stupid. Like, this is ridiculous. And I, like, honest to God, I laughed for like 20 minutes. Why do I believe this? And from there, I'm like, I gotta read about this. So I just looked for myself on the internet and I found everything on the internet.
So if any of your family members are in Scientology, it's just your brother?
Yes. No one in my family are Scientologists but my brother.
Okay. It sounds like you haven't necessarily done anything that would, until now, that would cause the church to declare you a suppressive person.
No, I don't think so. Like I've said, I've been outspoken about it before. Like, as far as being declared, I have no idea. I don't think so.
To a certain degree, they actually don't declare people anymore officially.
I've heard, but I don't think that's true.
I do believe it's true that people in authority have said that to people.
Exactly. Right.
I actually know for a fact that the International Justice Chief, Mike Ellis, has told people leaving the Sea Org, we don't declare people anymore. But like you, just because he said it doesn't mean I believe it.
Yeah, I don't believe that for a second. Yeah.
The thing IJC has been telling certain people is, we don't declare people because of social media and bad PR, but the policy still applies.
Yeah. Well, there's a roundabout way for every other policy.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Are you still in touch with any active Scientologists?
Very fleetingly. I'm still friends with some on Facebook that I was friends with my time there, but not in touch, no.
You don't live in California anymore. You recently moved to Tennessee, right?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Was that just for the hell of it or Scientology related?
Oh, no, my own personal.
Okay. The fact that you don't live in Los Angeles or Clearwater does make you kind of in a gray area where the church is barely going to care about anything you do because you're not near any of their important Sea Org bases. That's
true, but it's not at the same time because we still have an org here, right? And recently I was speaking out against the church, and a couple of people contacted me that are very like well-to-do Scientologists, and they're in Nashville in my area. And they're like, oh, you haven't been declared yet? Oh, but this and this and this. And so not that they can do much to me, but still there's like an org around me, and now they know where I live, and I don't know. Publicly on Facebook and also on YouTube, I have since I've actually taken down my channel because I was receiving some negative feedback, but yeah, I was speaking out on YouTube.
You had a channel?
I did, yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. Is it one of these things where it's just inactive? You could just click a button and it goes back up, or did you like delete it?
I don't know. I can check for you. I think it's inactive, but I'll double check. Yeah.
What had you put up? Just videos of you talking to the camera about Scientology stuff?
My channel is both things. So I have a diagnosis of dissociative identity disorder, which is formerly known as multiple personality disorder. So I spoke about that mostly to try to like break stigma about it. And then I also spoke about my time in Scientology and how those two correlate.
Okay, interesting. And so the whole channel wasn't even focused specifically on Scientology, but you were still getting some flack about it though?
Yes.
All right. Well, what else? Is there anything else about your experience you want to comment on?
I mean, how much time do you have? there's so much. I mean, that was just, excuse me. That's the main thing that I mostly want to get out there is like there's abuses that go on and they're just defended and it's disgusting and they're still being defended today. And it's just not okay.
Here's where Scientology is going to get itself into a lot of trouble. And I say that knowing there's plenty of places they have been and will be getting themselves into a lot of trouble. But
Sure.
Anyone who's been in Scientology knows for a fact that all of these auditing sessions are kept track of in great detail.
Yeah.
In folders that are never destroyed.
Yeah, I wish I had my PC folder. I would love to have my PC folders. Yeah. I want to know. Yeah.
And it's funny because sometimes when I say these things on videos, people will say, "You shouldn't say that. So you're giving Scientology a heads up. They're gonna run around and destroy all these things." Hey, me saying it in a video is not like a watershed moment to these folks.
Yeah, not at all. Not even a little bit. They know exactly.
Just for the hell of explaining this to people, not only are the notes in an auditing session kept track of in detail, and those notes go into a folder, but then a summary gets put together of everything in the folder. Right. And then a summary of the summary is put together. So even if you go in and destroy auditing session records,
right,
you'd have to recreate the entire folder in order to cover up the fact that you've destroyed an auditing record. And once you've done that, it's obvious you did it because that folder is usually 10, 20, 30 years old and you can't recreate it convincingly, especially when you're talking about hundreds and hundreds of folders.
Yep.
So, even in Laura Diekman's case, they ended up having to give her goddamn PC folders.
Oh, really? Oh, geez.
I haven't heard of anyone else who's been able to get their PC folders, but I'm telling you.
I kick myself in the ass for it because it's so easy to walk into like CC, for example, because I was CC public. And I could go in and ask for anybody's folder. They didn't ask me for ID. They didn't ask me who they were. I say, I need blah, blah, blah's PC folder. I'm their field auditor. They're like, okay, here you go. And they hand it over. Why didn't I think of that?
I know. And, I'm going to say this in this video, even though people will say, don't show your hand.
Yeah.
All it takes is one well-placed HGC admin somewhere in some Scientology org.
Yeah.
To start getting PC folders.
Seriously.
Of people who've been sexually abused as children or getting PC folders of people who've already left Scientology. It's not that hard. So I'll tell you what, let's do this. We'll keep this interview, not terribly long. If you come up with some ideas of, oh, I wanted to discuss this, or oh, I wanted to discuss that, just shoot me a message. We don't.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, little munchkin. Thanks for hanging in there with us.
She did okay for a teething baby, I think.
She did great.
She's like, dude, leave me alone.
What's her name again?
Thea.
Oh, she's so cute.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks for hanging in there with us, guys, and we will talk to you later. Bye.
Okay, if you want to see my rock and roll songs, click right on this guitar. And if you want to see a different one of my videos, then you could click right inside here. If you have subscribed or not, subscribe right here. Bye.